Hello and welcome to the Idaho Reports podcast. I'm Logan Finney. One of the big headline bills during the last legislative session was setting up the Idaho Launch program. And this week, the applications for that grant have opened. Joining me to discuss the Idaho Launch and all of the work that went into getting it up and running is Wendi Secrist, Executive Director of the Workforce Development Council. Thanks for joining us, Wendi.
Thanks for having me, Logan. Appreciate the opportunity.
So as our listeners may recall, Idaho Launch is a grant program that is for Idaho high school students. Can you remind us the details of all that went into that?
Sure. So Idaho Launch is going to provide an opportunity for graduating high school seniors to access up to $8,000, 80% of tuition and fees for a post-secondary education of their choice. The types of programs that we have available are aligned to InDemand Careers. And so it's everything from commercial truck driving licenses, cosmetology schools, to community college programs, to engineering and healthcare and other in-demand programs at four-year institutions. So a lot of variety as to what's available. One of the things that the council had to do was identify the list of in-demand careers. And we, used a very data-driven process. We, looked at all of the occupations in Idaho, and what we settled on was any occupation that has 50 or more annual openings would be considered in demand. And so that is about 240, just over 240 occupations that are eligible. And then we match those up against the programs that our institutions and private training providers are providing throughout the state. And that's what's available to students.
Yeah, I printed out the list the other day, and it's quite the extensive list of what are considered in-demand careers. So can you tell me who exactly makes up the Workforce Development Council, and how did this program come under your purview?
Sure. So the Workforce Development Council is a small agency, sits under the executive office of the governor. The council itself is a 37-member body appointed by the governor. So they act as kind of the board. And then our council staff, we're at about 15 people right now. The launch expansion has required us to hire, which gives us a good insight as to exactly what's going on, with employers throughout the state and how challenging it is to find employees. So the council has responsibilities under a number of different things. We have some federal programs that we manage funds for. We have the Workforce Development Training Fund. So when an employer pays their unemployment insurance taxes, 3% of that goes into the Workforce Development Training Fund. And then we're able to invest in programs throughout the state to help make sure that we have a good, strong talent pipeline available for employers. And then Launch is a new program that came to the council. And actually, Idaho Launch has been around since November of 2020. We started the program recognizing that there was a gap in short-term training programs that don't qualify for any financial aid, federal Pell Grants, any types of, student loans, other types of financial aid. And a lot of those jobs pay very, very well. And so looking at the resources that we had in the Workforce Development Training Fund, we said, well, what if we started a program that would help Idahoans access this short-term training and make them, whether they're employed or unemployed, be able to take that next step and earn a better living. And so over the last 2.5 years, almost 3 years since we started the program, we've been measuring the effectiveness of it and looking at the outcomes and watching people who enter training and look at what their wage growth has been. And the program has been incredibly successful. We've seen wage growth, in the neighborhood of $15,000 a year, 1 year post-training. That's life-changing for an individual. So we came into this, so you asked how, the Workforce Development Council got involved in Launch. And the council is really responsible for working across education and all the state agencies that are engaged in workforce development and the private sector and the employer community. And so it was a natural fit for us to take and scale this program and make it available for graduating high school students. So one of the, to that point with graduating high school students, our go on rates have been very low, across the state. So right now we're, I think 37, 38% last year. It's traditionally been, pre-pandemic in the low to mid 40s. And, we have to ask ourselves why are over 50% of our kids not going on? Is it funding? Is it money, right? That's one of the things. Is it that the traditional, college pathway, that they don't feel prepared or ready for it, or it's just they don't feel that it's the right thing for them at that point in their life? And so by providing them opportunities to choose any pathway to an in-demand career, we're hoping to see a significant closing of that gap, and that our kids recognize that if they want to go and become an electrician, a plumber, a truck driver, if they want to be a PhD engineer, if they want to be a nurse or a doctor or whatever, that we're going to celebrate that success. We need more of all of them, and so we're gonna support them, and we're gonna celebrate their success no matter which path they choose.
All right. And so with this grant program getting its legs under the Idaho Launch brand, that previously existing training for adults is still available, correct?
It is. So we still have and intend to continue to fund the program through the Workforce Development Training Fund. And so yes, so right now we're trying not to confuse folks, because IdahoLaunch.com is where the adult program is, but through Next Steps Idaho, which is the college and career planning website that the state board and the Workforce Development Council sponsor, that's where we have all of the information for students. So we're sending our high school kids to Next Steps, and adults can still get assistance through the Launch website.
Very cool. And so this is kind of intended to be a parallel track to the traditional four-year college and university route, right? So someone who wanted to pursue a launch grant couldn't, for example, go through and get the Idaho Opportunity Scholarship that the Board of Education offers?
So they can apply for both. The way that we built the Scholarship Idaho is the website that it is doing the applications, accepting the applications, and it allows the student to go through and indicate what they're planning to pursue, where they're which school they're intending to go to, and other details, and then it lets them know if they're eligible for both. So they're able to apply for both. And then, we know that kids' plans are going to change. And so, the launch application window is open until April 15th. And so if they go in and they thought that they were going to go to the University of Idaho and pursue an engineering degree, but they changed their mind and they're going to go to, ISU and pursue an instrumentation technology associate's degree, it's fine. They can change their pathway, and then everyone will be looking and working with the financial aid offices to pull together their support package.
So those applications open up this week, the first week of October, and you just said they're open through April. What sort of information does an interested student have to provide?
Sure. So it's actually pretty easy. We need them to tell us where they're going to high school, where they when they intend to graduate, what their plans are. So, that's probably the feedback that we're getting, from college and career advisors is, well, these kids don't always know where they're going to go. And that's okay. They don't have, we need to tell us where they're most likely to go. So, again, back to if they want to, change from one institution to another, as long as it's still an eligible program, then we'll support them through that over the coming months before they graduate from high school. But really, that's they're providing just that basic demographic information for us. They tell us what their plans are, and what career they plan to pursue, and that's about it. I mean, Launch does not require them to have a specific GPA. It requires that they graduate from high school and that they complete a career pathway plan. And we've been working with the college and career advisors throughout the state to make sure that they know what's required of that career pathway plan. But one of the really important things is they don't have to have that done in order to apply. They have to have that done by graduation. So there's, different districts will, I think the majority of the state will choose the next steps pathway for the career pathway plans, where there's a set of 3 activities in next steps that they need to complete. And because they create portfolios, we're able to match it behind the scenes, and we'll know that they completed their career pathway plan. But one of the other options that we gave districts is if their senior project is already aligned to career exploration and planning, then we can work with the district to approve their senior project. And then by knowing that they graduated from high school, we know that they completed their career pathway plan. And then we have a third option. There's some districts who use other tools and resources for career planning, and so we'll work with them if that, but we don't see that there will be that many of those. So mostly in next steps and either through that or their senior project.
Very cool. Yeah, my senior project had to do with career exploration. So
when they're already doing that, then let's support it. Let's make sure that they're that's what we want. We want them to have a vision of where they're headed, and career plans, a plan is something that is like a moment in time, right? What we want is that they're planning. We want them to understand what the process is to go through that career planning process, so that if they get into their program and a semester in or a couple of weeks in, they're like, I do not like this, that they know how to pivot.
And so we referenced that this could be used for something like the engineering program at U of I or some of those technical associate degrees at ISU. There are some private partnerships and like apprenticeship programs and stuff this can be used for too, right?
Absolutely. So we've partnered with all of the joint apprenticeship training centers in the state who offer electrical, plumbing, HVAC, ironworker, other types of apprenticeships, along with the community colleges workforce training centers. So they offer related instruction for many of the apprenticeships as well. And then through efforts that the Department of Labor, the Workforce Development Council, and Career Technical Education and other partners have been building apprenticeships throughout the state. There's other related instruction programs. So we're able to support kids entering into apprenticeships with helping to offset the cost of that related instruction.
Earlier in the conversation, you mentioned that this list of in-demand careers was compiled and you guys selected the careers that had more than 50 openings each year. Can you tell me what were the highest on that list? What careers are the most in demand in Idaho right now?
Yeah, so the most in demand, there's a number of careers that are the most in demand that don't require a lot of post-secondary training, like retail sales and working in restaurants and other types of things. But when you kind of get into those that do require post-secondary training, you're really looking at healthcare fields, nursing, truck driving, construction. Lots of there's just so much variety. I mean, I think that's one of the beautiful things about this program is that it's it really kind of supports people going into a variety of occupations, and it's not just limited to 2 or 3 industries. Lots of but traditionally, I mean, registered nurses, CNAs, truck drivers, heavy equipment operators, electricians, plumbers. I mean, all of those, tend to always come up close to the top of those in-demand lists.
Yeah, several pages of options. It runs the gamut.
Mm-hmm.
And so just to kind of timestamp this conversation, the applications are opening right now at the beginning of October. The legislative session feels like a long time ago now, but that was only 6 or 9 months ago that this program was spun up. You referenced you guys have hired some new staff, but can you tell me just how much of a lift this was for the Workforce Development Council to get this up and running?
This has been an incredible lift. It's been a lot of fun. We've really enjoyed it, but yeah, it's been 6 months since the legislation was signed, and we have had to, develop how we were going to accept applications, develop all of the training and the resources that, were going to be needed to help our school partners, all of the different community partners that, work with high school kids. And so building out the application process, all of the policies, we've had to develop policies, for what is an in-demand career? How are we going to, handle, the extensions? I mean, that's one of the things that if somebody is going on a religious, mission, or going into the military, or going into a structured volunteer service like Peace Corps or AmeriCorps, has a medical issue, we need to be able to provide an opportunity for them to be able to delay their grant, because one of the most important things about Launch is that they have to apply while they're in high school before they graduate. They have to apply. They can't come back a year later and say, well, I was a graduate of the class of 24. They're not eligible any longer. They have to have applied before they graduate from high school by April 15th, so that we have them, in the queue. And so students that are going to do, something like what I mentioned earlier, after high school, they need to apply for an extension with us. So we had to develop policies around that, and, just all of the different things that go into starting up a program. And we're not done yet. This was a big milestone. We've been looking at October 3rd as our, kind of first milestone, but the next one comes, when we actually start funding the awards. And we have, we're in the procurement process to get a grant management platform, because once we fund these accounts, we need to, the Workforce Development Council believes strongly in transparency and, and accountability. And so we want to make sure we have a strong system in place to be able to manage the grants and make sure that, we're doing what we said we would do, and what the statute tells us that, we're supposed to do. So that's kind of our next big hurdle, is getting that grant management platform not only acquired, but then implemented. And then going through the awarding process. So, we have, while April 15th is the absolute deadline, statute requires us to make the first round of initial awards by December 31st. So we'll be taking applications from right now until November 30th, and then we'll take that pool of applications and we'll put out contingent offers in November or in December to the students that have applied during that window. And then we'll do another window sometime in February. We'll take that second round, and then April 15th will be the third round. So we'll be doing award announcements by December 31st, by March 31st, and by May 31st to let students know what's available. But there'll be contingent awards because they have to graduate. They have to have completed their career plan. We have to validate all of that stuff after they've graduated to be able to finalize their award.
Yeah, I think that's a super important detail to emphasize, is the students have to do their applications before graduation. And even though those applications opening are a huge milestone for you guys at the Workforce Development Council, there's still a lot on your plate.
There is, but we're up for it.
Well, Wendi, thanks for taking the time to talk to us. Is there anything else about Idaho Launch or generally about the Workforce Development Council our listeners should be aware of?
Nope, just I think the main thing is, if you know a senior in high school, please let them know about the program. Send them to nextsteps.idaho.gov. They'll be able to find the launch information, but also the application very quickly off of the website, and encourage them to apply.
All right. Wendi Secrist, Executive Director with the Idaho Workforce Development Council. Thanks so much for joining us this week.
Thanks, Logan.
Presentation of Idaho Reports on Idaho Public Television is made possible through the generous support of the Laura Moore Cunningham Foundation, committed to fulfilling the Moore and Bettis family legacy of building the great state of Idaho, by the Friends of Idaho Public Television, and by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.
Hi, I'm Marcia Franklin, the producer and host of Dialogue. For more than 25 years, we've been bringing you conversations that matter. More than 150 of those conversations are with writers, and now you can take them with you wherever you go, while you're walking, around the house, or in the car. Just search for Dialogue with Marcia Franklin on Apple Podcasts and other podcast platforms, and remember to subscribe so that new shows download automatically. Enjoy.